Hi, I'm Andy Schertz, Product Manager for Epson ColorWorks, and I'd like to talk today about the C831 and its new successor, the C6500 series. The 831 was one of our first printers to really go out into the industrial space. It's all over the place, especially in the chemical industry, but industries in general. So I want to compare the C831 to the newer C6500 series and show you some of the advantages of why it's in your best interest to consider an upgrade. So first off, we look at these. You can see the size and the footprint. The overall footprint is pretty similar between the two printers. Okay? The C6500 series is a little bit taller, but usually that's free space in an environment. But when you consider the paper, the C6500 is actually smaller because it has the media that can fit within the printer. It uses less absolute space than the C831, which will have to have the box of media behind the printer. And realistically, the C831 does not like to pull straight, so it means you have to somehow have a table with a hole or things like this in it to pull up on it if you could. So we have a big advantage, I believe, in the terms of the overall form factor that makes the C6500 series a little bit more appropriate. The next thing we want to draw attention to is the C831 and its control panel. And although it is functional, one of the problems is it basically has lights and some buttons on here. And at any one time, what is really going on is not so easy. I mean, if everything's working great, fine. Maybe the ink going out, it's got a pretty easy indicator light, but sometimes lights are blinking and flashing and it's not really clear, and there are no error messages on the printer, which has made, over time, the 831 a little bit difficult to use. In contrast, the C6500 series has a full color panel, so you can see clearly the status of all the inks, what's going on, what media size it's set for, what the printer thinks is happening. So instead of a blinking light or two over here and I've got to maybe remember or look up the manual, I can see everything about this printer. And in case something goes wrong, it's going to give me a detailed error message, and even pictorially, it's going to take me through what's wrong to help me try to correct the situation. So a big advantage in keeping the printer up and running with this control panel between these two printers. Another major difference between these two products is that the C831 used pin-fed media. And pin-fed media has advantages in terms of being able to be robust and pulling and things like this, but invariably the problem with the pin-fed media is fewer people have the expertise to convert it. A lot of times they will leave the small pinhole chads that will get caught in the printer and ultimately defeat the printing. And even in the best of circumstances, the media is going to be more expensive. So when you look at the same size label, the 831 is going to have to use pin-fed, which is going to make at minimum a 10% increase in material that you're using. So for the same number of labels, you're basically going to have to buy 10% more material. The 6500 series, based on friction fed, can feed without the perf strips and saving you substantially on your media costs. So now both the 6500 and the 831 are designed for heavy-duty use in industrial environments. But nevertheless, when you're doing a lot of label production, there's always the chance that a label will delaminate and get stuck within the machine. Okay? When that happens, there's a huge difference between these two products. When we look at the C831, even though we can open this cover, the media is actually trapped between two plates and there is no easy access. So if this label is coming off in the machine, an end user cannot service themselves. And this will have to be disassembled. Take the case apart, take the whole thing apart just to get that label out of the machine. If you've got labels you've got to get produced today, this is downtime. Okay? In contrast, the C6500 series is completely easy to clean that stuck media out of the printer. Simply remove the source roll, open the covers, and next thing you know, my fingers are actually touching. There's no hidden spots. I can get to anywhere that I need to unclear that stuck label, get it out of the machine, close my covers, get it back up and running, and I'm ready to print more labels. Of course, the next thing to talk about when I talk about these two printers and their capabilities against one another is print quality. Of course, the job of the printer is to print, and the 831 is a good solid performer, but fundamentally has a much lower resolution. Nominally, it's about 360 by 360 dpi, which is good, but the 6500 series can literally go all the way up to 1200 by 1200. Based on the precision core technology, it's just going to make the text that much sharper, the barcodes that much better, and the overall image quality you're going to get out of the 6500 series is just going to be a lot better. So for any kind of application, when you're doing your labels, you're going to have a higher level of capability with the 6500A series. In addition to the superior print resolution and print head technology of the 6500 series, there's also an advantage in terms of versatility. Okay? So when we talk about a large label like this, of course the 831 does a great job and the 6500 can do a similar job. But when we get to wanting to do more versatile things, perhaps small labels, the 831 is limited by the tractor feed mechanism that can only get so narrow. And basically, you have to have a label that is at least 4 inches or bigger to fit in the 831. In contrast, the C6500 is actually able to go down to a minuscule 1 inch by 0.31 inches. So you can imagine I can go down to that little all the way up to 8.5 by 22. So it has a range that is just incredible. So if your needs change, it doesn't matter. You're covered with the 6500 series. Beyond the print and use of the printers here, there's an even bigger distinction between the 6500 series and the C831. The first thing to realize is the C831 is dependent on using a Windows driver. And that Windows driver is actually doing the rasterization on the PC and sending down a raster image to the printer. Of course, in big networks where you may have hundreds of printers and lots of labels, this network throughput could be enormous. It also made it an enormous challenge to talk natively to popular middleware packages. In contrast, the 6500 series is actually based on a command-based language, Epson's escape label, that is tight and efficient and can connect then to many more opportunities. So for example, we can connect natively to all the popular middleware drivers. We can connect to SAP. We can connect to Linux or Mac, okay? Or it can even be homemade applications where people talk to the printer directly, bypassing all drivers and all middleware, anything, okay? And even as far as going directly to release a thermal transfer printer, because the 6500 is designed to accept native ZPL, so you can expand maybe places where the C831 could never quite replace because you could not fit it in with the workflow. The 6500 can drop straight in. So a huge advantage. Next to the connectivity is also the management capabilities. The C831 had no real ability to tell somebody outside of looking at the printer itself what's going on. Is it online? Is it working? Is it got supplies? What's happening with it? In contrast, the 6500 series connects with Epson Device Administration, a remote management tool that lets me see all my printers on the network, what the status of the printers are, lets me control those printers. So if I have an installation with 100 or 200 printers and I want to ensure that they are consistently set up, I can design a golden setting and broadcast it to the entire base. So really the 6500 is much more suited for the industrial workspace and to be managed in a big enterprise environment. Of course, a critical concern with both of these printers will be, can it pass BS 5609? How durable the labels? Well, in this regard, the printers are actually quite similar. So they are both based on Epson's proprietary pigment technology that passes BS 5609 with all kinds of synthetic media. You can use the exact same media in the C831 that you can use in the 6500, of course, without the perforation strips. So all the durability and performance requirements that you've already qualified in and you know you need and you know you demand, your state with a 6500, it can definitely handle it and do the same job. So with any commercial product, the service options are also a critical factor to consider. So the C831 has our depot repair and CETA, which is spare near, which means basically your printer would be swapped with a quick replacement printer. And these are very popular options. However, the C831 was never designed to actually be repaired at the customer site. And a popular option that people do want to have is the ability to keep their printer, keep its connectivity, keep all of its settings, and just have somebody come out and repair it. This is where the 6500 really shines in that it has been designed to be field serviceable. So this now opens up the ability to have on-site service also as a third option for the 6500. So then you can keep your printer, all of its settings, the technician comes to you, gets you back up and running quickly, a full service offering with the new 6500 series printers. When we're talking about industrial printers, the workflow is also a critical factor to consider. The 831 does not have a cutter and does not have a peeler. So basically, every label has to be hand torn off the machine, okay? And it has to actually advance the label to the tear position. You've got to tear it off and then somehow coordinate that with the redraw. In contrast, the 6500 has many options. Of course, we have the cutter option, which I'm showing here, which means as the label comes out, I could cut it immediately after it's printed and take it to where I need it. If I want to do a batch, I can keep the entire batch together and only use the cutter to separate the batch at the end. Or I can actually use the peel capability. So for example, I have a drum. I want to apply this label, but my operator's got his hands busy or gloves so he can move the drum. The label will come out already pre-peeled. It saves me the time and the effort, and I can apply it like that. Or even automated apply. So the 6500 with the ability to peel and its remote I/O that lets a robot control the printer itself can go into a fully automated line, okay, and produce a label that is peeled, ready for the robot to apply and controlled by it. So a lot of increase of flexibility in the workflow, and that's just another great advantage of the 6500 series over its predecessor.